Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 252 of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is David Howe.
My name is Patrick Nisley.
My name is Summer Rain.
Oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest joining us on today's episode of the podcast. We've got the wonderful Robbie Trevino, concept artist, on the show. How's it going, Robbie?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. It's good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. We have you on today, Robbie, because we're going to be talking all about concept art in the entertainment industry, in video games, and kind of why concept art is so important, why concept artists are so important, and how that process works. Very excited to talk to you about that. Before we get into that, though, we have lots of news and rumors. There's actually a lot to talk about this week. Sega, their union has been ratified, which is pretty great. We love to see that. Lots of industry news. Companies splitting off from the behemoth that is Embracer Group. Xbox Series X had an all-digital version leaked. And maybe some Silksong news? I don't know. We'll have to get into that here in a second, see if it means anything. It is April Fool's when we're recording this, so hopefully none of this stuff is proven to be fake by the time this thing goes live. But other than that, before we get into all that, how are we all doing? Do we have a good week this week? How are we doing this week?
Yeah, it's a good week. There's a lot of family time this weekend, and that was a lot, but it was good mostly. It's just I went to a lot of long things, and that was fine. It was good.
Oh yeah, it was Easter, wasn't it?
Yes, it was Easter weekend. Or
you were celebrating a Trans Day of Visibility with your family.
Yes, both.
Yeah.
And at any rate, that was good. Also, it's last week I mentioned that the demo for Monochrome Heights would be coming out. I didn't get the all clear from Steam until like just recently. So the demo will be out by the time this podcast releases. So please, everybody, go check out the Monochrome Heights Steam page and download the demo for the game. I'm really excited about it. And I was hoping it would be last week, but that's sort of my own naivety and stuff. But really excited to share that with everyone. So.
Hell yeah, man. Can't wait to play it.
Yeah, I can't wait to play it too. I'm still getting acclimated to being back up north. I did also get to spend this weekend with my family, celebrating my Trans Day of visibility with my sister.
So visible.
We're right. Just can't commit crimes that one day of the year. No, I did some real life gaming with my family though. Yesterday, I picked up a copy of Ready, Set, Bet, which is basically horse races, but like tabletop, and you bet in real time. You use 2d6 dice, and that determines like the horses running along the track. And just as I expected, it was going to be a hit with my family because I come from family of gamblers, and the local horse track got shut down because the Bears just bought it out to use it as their stadium now. So. We have to fill the void somehow. But I'm otherwise, still just just living in a new place, still getting moved in. So hopefully I'll get, some art and stuff behind me soon.
Yeah.
Yes, my tiny.
I'm glad
door.
You're buying a little door.
What's in there?
I am concerned as to what's behind that door. Maybe time will tell.
Kids go.
Yeah.
Right. You got a little Harry Potter.
We'll do an
in
episode where I come out of the door.
Yeah. David from the future lives in there. I'm doing okay. It's been a pretty chill week outside of work. It's been a very busy work week, but also like a good work week. We're getting a lot done. We're getting closer on a lot of these shows we've been working on, and kind of going, I don't want to say sliding into the finish line, but it's like been productive work, to where you're like really exhausted by the end of the day, but that's been kind of good. And then, other than that, I've been doing a lot of reading. We made a book channel on the Discord finally, and I didn't realize how many people were literate in our Discord and could actually read. But everybody's like really popping off in the book channel, man. So that's exciting. We love, it's nice to have a page turner. But what about you, Robbie? How's your week been?
Well, I was on this really cool games project, but unfortunately it got canned. Just kidding, April Fools. Anyone? No one's making April Fools jokes?
I guess so.
That one's a very believable one too, given everything,
Yeah.
But no. I mean, stuff's great, Although I actually am on something really cool right now, and I don't know. It's just a good time. Like for me right now, it's been like a rough, like last year was crazy I got caught up between like the film strikes and all the game stuff. I sort of jumped between the two a lot. And, but no, I'm on something steady right now and it's very cool. And I mean, other than that, I don't know, it's the sun starting to come out a bit more in LA. If you can believe it, it rains in LA and we've been getting a lot of rain recently, like uncharacteristically. Which is why I moved away from Seattle. And I'm like, well, I thought I left this behind. Like, why is it a thing here? Why am I paying so much extra money to live here? Like, but yeah, I don't know. Like, how's my week going? It's been one day, so it's kind of hard to say, but so far, so good.
I'm glad to hear it, man.
Well, last week we did an episode on Princess Peach Showtime, and we talked about a lot of other things too, and we got great comments from folks in the Discord and on YouTube, and just a few shout outs here. Cool Uncle Vince on the Discord defended David and his Picross 2 journey. I was the villain last week, apparently, or definitely, at least with respect to this. The next point is up for discussion, so I apologize to you, David.
And then double down, be the heel.
I can't. DCD said too much Domino's slander, because I also slandered Domino's, the pizza place. And then AV, getting on topic here, AV enjoyed the Peach chat. It was nice to hear a discussion of it that wasn't focused around hanger-ringing over the lack of difficulty. Appreciate that, AV. And then over on YouTube, we heard from Bobo Kitty 123, who said, Princess Peach Showtime isn't my type of game, but I have to admit that the outfits are super cute. Indeed, they are. I was just talking with my niece, like my son and my niece and I were having this conversation about all the dresses in the game just yesterday, and what our favorites were and stuff like that. So, very cute. And then, as I mentioned last week on the show, the Monochrome Heights, the indie game I'm making, the demo is going to be out, and I got a few comments on that. So Carasetta said, yay, haven't played it since the very first beta when it was just a little block guy, and I'm hyped. Thank you, Carasetta. And Howdy Hat said, hype for the new Monochrome Heights / Ty Tybo's art. Yes, the art in the game. I'm really excited to share what Tyson has done. And so you all can see that. So yeah, thanks to everyone who commented on the episode. Appreciate it. And, if you're listening to this week, there's anything we talk about that you have a thought or a comment on, definitely send us a note, tag us, and we'll try to shout you out next time. We always appreciate it if you could, share the podcast with a friend. If you got somebody who's into gaming or Switch, definitely tell them about it. Hit up our Patreon if you feel like supporting us. We could always use support over there on the Patreon. Definitely check that out. And make sure you come and watch the video version on YouTube and hit like and subscribe there. And with that, we'll move on to this week's news and rumors. First up, we've been talking about Mario Maker as the imminent closure of the servers for the Wii U is happening, in a week now? Or less than a week?
But by the time this episode's come out, it'll be less than a week. Yeah. For the 3DS and the Wii U.
Well, last week we talked about the drama surrounding the last unbeaten stage in Mario Maker, which is called Trimming the Herbs, which turned out to have been made using a tool-assisted speedrunning, a Taz bot. But there are still people working on it, right, David?
Yeah, I mean, so basically Team 0% has officially taken it off of the levels to beat, to finally complete Super Mario Maker, which was their goal. They were like, all right, well, this thing was made under dubious circumstances, so we're taking it off. You don't have to beat this in order for us to have completed the game. But that people haven't given up, because that was a bit of a womp womp ending to that entire journey going through. And I think people have just been unwilling to accept that that is the end of the journey. And so a few people have been actually getting pretty fucking close to beating it. Lil Curbs is one of them, pretty famous Twitch streamer who does a lot of Mario Maker videos. He's been chipping away at it for a while. But then also this French Twitch streamer named Sanix92 has been chronicling their progress on Twitter, and it's been fascinating to see every day they get further and further, and they just keep being like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm actually doing this right now. And it's been very exciting to watch. So we've got a week left. I'm really hoping that they can grind this 17-second level out and finally beat this thing. But it's been pretty exciting to see, given that I thought the whole thing was just kind of dead and in the water. So I wanted to give a little update on the Team 0% saga.
Moving on to a little bit of good news that'll be followed by a lot of not so great news. But we're going to start with the good bit here. And that is that over at Sega of America, there has been the first union contract has been ratified for, I guess it's about 150 Sega of America workers. They're going to get raises and other benefits and stuff from this contract that they have all ratified. So it's pretty cool to see, this union moving forward at Sega. Hopefully we continue to hear more about unions being formed and the progress there. But we've got some bad news related to Sega as well. Sega is apparently selling off Relic and cutting a bunch of jobs. Relic is, I think, located in the EU, as I understand it. And they're cutting roles. Presumably, in addition to selling Relic, they're going to be cutting some roles in some of their other development studios over in Europe and perhaps elsewhere as well. But it's not all good news over at Sega.
Yeah, Relic most recently worked on like Company of Heroes, and they did the new Age of Empires game for Microsoft. So they've been around for a while, and they've been doing lots of stuff. So it's sad to see that a lot of people are losing their jobs there, but they're also transitioning to an independent studio, as we've been seeing a lot of recently. I think that's kind of just a way to wash, for these bigger companies to wash their hands of a lot of liability, essentially, while kind of being like, see, look, you guys still have a company, without just completely shuttering a studio, right? But that said, yeah, there were a few other parts of Sega that were affected by this, including Sega Hardlight. Most notably, they do a lot of their mobile games, including, I think, what was the Sonic Dream Team, that recent 3D game that was Apple Arcade exclusive. So it's sad to see job losses there as well.
And then over at Nintendo of America, there's also been some job losses going on. This is Nintendo of America uses a lot of contractor workers especially for like QA. And it sounds like, according to an article that Kotaku has put out, there's been sort of a lot of people not getting new contracts and being let go. While there has been some people being hired full time and that sort of thing, it sounds like overall it's a big downsizing that's happening over at Nintendo of America. Also of interesting note, that's worth talking about and exploring, but this Kotaku article has a couple other little interesting things in it. I don't know if we want to tackle them all at once or what have you. But it sounds like these people who are now talking with Kotaku have been saying over time they've felt undervalued and underpaid and that sort of thing. And also that talking about the work that they do and like how with the numbers of people that are going to be there, they're not sure, that the quality will still be there. And also that they have not ever seen a Switch 2 or a Super Switch, as we like to call it, which is, according to the rumors and all that, it sounded like that was, kind of ready to go and then maybe got delayed, but doesn't mean anything if it's just what these people are, doesn't mean nobody's seen it, but it's just an interesting tidbit that came out of this as well.
There's no Switch 2 and there's no Easter Bunny and there's no sorry, there's no Santa. Don't you guys have phones? Like Nintendo's only doing mobile games now after the Switch, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot to take away from this news, and I think it could mean a lot of different things. I think some of the main takeaways is that, well, it's either there's not a ton for them to actually test right now. We know that Nintendo's been this is kind of Nintendo's lull year right now. We don't know about a lot of releases outside of what's coming this summer, and it's almost all re-releases and remasters of previous Mario games for the most part.
Right.
So either have this big backlog of games that have already been gone through QA and have already been tested and stuff like that. And there just isn't a lot for them to work on right now. Or what's I think is probably more likely from this is that they're just consolidating. They're trying to consolidate ahead of a Super Switch launch. They're trying to consolidate their QA departments in all these different countries into one kind of main unit, right? I think a lot of the contractors that were let go, well, not a lot of them, but a few of the contractors that were let go at least were moved over to full-time. Maybe they're trying to make NOA more back to its roots, which is like distribution and localization and stuff like that. Not as much game testing, maybe keeping that more in a lot of these new offices that they're building in Kyoto and stuff like that in Japan. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're just trying to consolidate there. It does suck to see Nintendo being hit by this hammer as well. It's not necessarily clear that this has anything to do with the mass layoffs that are happening everywhere, but it is the first of the layoffs that we've seen at Nintendo since all of this has happened. So that's a real bummer to see.
Definitely.
And then maybe we can talk some about what this means for the Switch successor. If of the people that have been interviewed, they're saying they haven't seen anything yet, which is kind of shocking to hear. The thought in the industry and the buzz around all this is that the Switch successor has been like delayed, which you would think means that people within the company have had hands-on with this at this point. Especially, I mean, you would think QA testers or game testers in general would have been testing on all different kinds of hardware if games were going to be released cross-platform. So what's the takeaway from that? What do you guys think about that?
I think my first thought was, unfortunately, it makes me wonder how long they'd been planning these layoffs. That this is a group of people that they knew they were going to let go, so therefore they didn't want the Switch successor in their hands.
Yeah, I kind of wondered the same thing, if there was maybe some
planned.
If it's like or just like they've been very careful who they've shown it to, if it has been shown at all, right? In Nintendo of America. I had the same thought, but the other side could be, right, that then alternatively it's just not as far along as everybody said, and maybe dev kits got out to developers and that sort of thing, but Nintendo themselves hasn't gotten their games that far, which just is kind of weird if that's true, but or it's just, I don't know, it's really kind of head scratchy.
Yeah, I'm just surprised there hasn't been more leaks of this thing at this point. We've got a story coming up about some leaked hardware from another company, right? It just makes me think that everybody has been wrong about assuming that this thing is super close this entire time, right? Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on this, Robbie, regarding the layoffs or about the Switch successor?
I was literally just Googling like Switch 2, Switch successor, just to see. I don't know. I think a lot of times companies, like, whether it's something small and unknown and it's all like a complete like illusion, right? All smoke and mirrors, or it's something as accomplished and like renowned as Nintendo, right? It's like sometimes there are just these optical plays and these like narratives that get pushed around for the sake of like business and, drumming up interest and hype. And it's just like, I've spent enough time working at I worked at Microsoft for a while. I worked at Xbox for a few years, and it was like I was like 20 layers removed from like the real stuff that happened, And by the time you're hearing about something, if you're just like a contractor, it's already like too late, or you just have no input whatsoever. You're just it's almost like you're a cog in a machine, right? And like, I don't know, that's all just to say that it's like you don't really know. There's probably a very small group of people that really know, like, this is our actual plan for the Switch successor, and it's not what anyone thinks,
Yeah.
It's like, it's really hard to tell. I don't know, but like I wouldn't really trust this gaming news source outlet. Like, they're not really Nintendo. It's hard to say whether they actually know,
Right. And all the people chirping about Nintendo's future have to chirp about something,
Yeah, so yeah, and that's great to have conversation and speculation, but it's like, I really don't I don't know. It's frustrating hearing about the hardships people are going through. It's it is pain. Like it is an unfortunate reality of like being a part of that industry, like that workforce that creates, and produces the thing that industry then like gives to the public. It's just this like inevitable thing with companies, unfortunately.
And before there is a big sea change or before there's a new big platform or a new product launch as well, it makes sense to see in the time before that to have either a lull in releases like we're having right now, or to see reorganization of the workforce and stuff like that. We've also been seeing Nintendo going after emulators and emulation a lot more, and fan sites and all this kind of stuff with a lot more fervor in the last little bit of time. So it just kind of makes sense that something's on the horizon, and it's like, and yeah, like you said, we're not going to necessarily hear about this from contractors that are being laid off because they're probably not going to be seeing it at all.
They might not even know. They might have worked there for a long time, and it's like they're still not. They're on this floor of the building, but not this floor of the building.
Well, it's the blue badges versus the red badges, right? Is that what it was?
Oh, it was. I think it was orange at Microsoft, but yes, orange. Yeah. I never did get the blue badge, but yes.
We'll move on to another bit of, I don't know where this news lands, actually. I'd be curious to hear what y'all think. But we've been talking about how Gearbox might spin off from Embracer. They get sold. Well, it turns out they've been purchased by Take-Two, another gigantic video game publisher. So Take-Two has bought from Embracer Gearbox Entertainment. And of note, these numbers are just nuts to me, right? But like, sounds like it was for like 460 million or something like that. But in
stock, right?
And then when Embracer bought Gearbox, they were valued at 1.4 billion. So I don't know that's what this Reuters article says. So I don't know what that means, if that's how much they purchased them for, but presumably, right? Wow, that's a little bit lower. It's still a lot of money. I don't know. Obviously Embracer Group is kind of the bad guy, right? And in everybody's mind. And so kind of Gearbox getting away from that is maybe good, but Take-Two is just another giant mega corporation. So it's kind of like, I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah, but their shares rose 1.4% in afternoon trading. So
yeah, that's all that matters. Ooh. That is all that matters.
Well, every time I hear Embracer, it's like, I just seeing Summer's look. I'm like, yep, that's the look when Embracer gets mentioned in anything. So this could be a very positive thing.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if you can get off the Embracer ship, do it. I think it's like, not that I'm any big fan of Take-Two, like the multimedia conglomerate Take-Two Interactive. It's like, they've got their own problems as well, but it's like Embracer has proven themselves to be the wretched hive of nincompoopery and lack of business acumen. So it's like definitely worth getting out if you can, but yeah, I don't know. It's weird. We've been seeing a lot of people like either shuttering or spinning off into indie. This is the first time we've seen kind of like horse trading like this from Embracer. And so it's, I wonder how much more of that we'll see. They still own quite a bit of IP and quite a bit of studios. So I bet we'll be seeing more of that pretty soon.
Moving into some rumor territory here. There's been rumors again about a attachment for the Switch. As you may recall, I think it was last week or the week before where we were talking about that rumor of the name of a new Nintendo device being attached, ironically, or perhaps relatedly, to this rumor about potentially attaching some device that you can attach your phone to the top of the Switch. I'll be honest, I don't put a lot of stock in this. But
this is rumor territory here. This is the rumors part of news and rumors.
But we're talking about it. So what do y'all think? Would you ever see a use case or have a desire to slap your phone on the top of a Switch?
I'm conflicted. because I like having my phone as a separate device when I'm playing my Switch, right? Like that's the one thing that stops me from using my phone the most from gaming on it is like, because I do have a backbone for my Switch and I do really enjoy it. It works really well. But then I can't use my phone as a phone when I'm in the middle of a game. It's really annoying to have to close out of the game. I got to make sure that I can like have dedicated gaming time, right? So that would be the same issue with the Switch. But god damn, I want to play 3DS games. And like I want to be able to like shovel everything over. I really do miss a lot of the ingenuity that brought developers, the software that they put on the 3DS and the DS to that. Having that dual screen. So I'm conflicted.
I hope this isn't what the Switch successor is something that leans much more towards
what everyone thought the Wii U
phones.
was.
Yeah, exactly. A Wii U, but with a phone instead of a second screen does not sound great. Right?
But the successor is not an actual new Switch. It's an attachment for it, which I'm joking about how that's what everyone thought the Wii U was, not an actual new system.
Yes. That's definitely not the way to go about it. I know, right? And I mean, and I don't know that I really necessarily believe all of this. I kind of just wanted to put it out there. So if it does end up being true, we talked about it. But there were some patents recently that about a more AR focused. They did some software patents for like AR technology, and a lot of these included like the dogs from Nintendogs, like in the imagery, right? And so this would be something that you could use for that. You know what I mean? There's no onboard camera on a Switch. There's no, there are AR games on the Switch, but it's all like external cameras, like the Mario Kart home circuit and stuff like that with the mounted camera, like on the car and stuff. So, I mean, if they did something like that for phones, it wouldn't be entirely unprecedented. And I think that something like Nintendogs would be a pretty good use case for that, right? Have your phone, take pictures of your place, and then you can play with your dogs like on your Switch, or even if they did a mobile version of this, like as a phone app or whatever, right? But yeah, it'd be interesting. I'm not a huge fan of those like controller attachments that you put a little clip onto and then use your phone as the screen. I just think like the weight distribution has never felt good to me. So like clipping a second screen onto my Switch does not sound like something that I would be interested in. But I would like to see DS games on the Virtual Console or in NSO, I suppose.
Wait, so quick question. All this discussion and almost like speculation about like, like the hardware component, like what's the next, like what is the move? Have you guys spoken much? I don't want to like, tangent off too much, but like have you discussed like Netflix games specifically, which is just such an enigma right now, honestly. Yeah. Well, I find it interesting because like, Netflix is this, this possibly, I don't know, is it the biggest streaming platform?
Yeah,
it's the biggest. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So like, what's the angle with games, right? Like, and it has to be something a little bit better than just mobile games, because when you hear like they've got this secret studio called Studio Blue, and they're, they've hired AAA titans to like make a AAA game, so they're throwing all their money at this thing. Like, what would the hardware component of something like that be? If there even is one. Like there has to be, right? But like, what does that look like? It's the Netflix console? It's the Netflix VR set? Like what is like this is
I don't know,
man.
A lot. It's weird because Apple's doing it too. Like Apple's doing a big push for mobile gaming for the new iPhones, right? They've got Death Stranding on there. They've got Resident Evil 4 remake and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, but then it shows it and it's got on-screen like touch control joysticks and stuff. It's like, that's a miserable way to play video games, like it's really like not a very fun way to play games. I mean, of course you can do a little backbone, or you can have these third-party peripheral things that kind of like add tactile buttons and controllers to your mobile units. But it's like, it just doesn't, none of it ever like really feels good. And we haven't really like found a good, when's the last time we really had anything in earnest try to be a handheld console and a phone was like the Xperia Play with like the Sony slide out little controller, which was a good idea, but obviously super underpowered at the time. So I don't know. It is a conundrum, and it does make you wonder if Netflix, if they're really pushing for games, if they have hardware in mind, or if they're thinking about that would be a first for them, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely dabbled with mobile games already, but like, I don't imagine like the big AAA move is like, this one is also coming to your phone. It's like, no, it's probably going to be hopefully something. I mean, I'm with Summer. Like, I try to think of, if I could compartmentalize my like bits of hardware, like I don't want my phone to be synonymous with like it's gaming time now. It's like, no,
Yes.
I'm on my phone enough already. Like, I prefer not to be, like, and games for a lot of people, including myself, are like a form of an escape. So it's like, I need to have the two separate personally.
Yeah. And if you run your battery down playing Call of Duty and then your car careens off a cliff into a lake and you only have seconds to call somebody and it's dead, then you're fucked. You got to keep that battery alive.
Why are you playing Call of Duty?
Right? That's what a funny
This is a
example.
hypothetical.
No, I mean,
That's why you crashed off the cliff, because you were playing Call
well,
of
for
Duty.
me,
and you're like, oh.
it's the worst for me, right? I'm about to get the Battle Royale in Fortnite, and then my dad calls and just fucks it up for me. And then I take a headshot, and then I answer the phone, and I'm like, fuck, Dad.
It's like,
I hate you,
what? I
Dad.
was just calling.
Stupid idiot dad.
Don't you know I'm trying to get epic wins in Fortnite?
Well, we should move on to another bit of hardware rumors. This one seems a little more credible. This is a leak of a new Xbox Series X that has happened. There's been some photos out there, and there's been multiple sources corroborating that there is likely to be a new Xbox Series X coming out this summer that I guess is going to be white, presumably, based on the leak, and also is this the X, not the S, but it is diskless, right?
Mm-hmm.
It does not have a disk drive, and maybe has a few other minor upgrades as well, right?
Adorably all digital, they called it in their documentation.
So adorable.
Yeah. This is not exactly, I mean, we knew this was coming from the court documents that had come out during, I think it was the Activision merger SEC filings, right? So like we knew that this was coming, but that one was kind of a bit more curved and sort of looked like an Amazon Alexa almost. This is just a straight up Series X, but it's white and there's no disk drive, right? In what we're seeing. This might be a prototype device here. It could be early. I mean, the images themselves are like incredibly low res. It looks like they're blown up from thumbnails from somebody's phone or something like that, right? So take it with like a bit of a grain of salt, but I mean, it certainly looks like it's happening, and it's probably happening soon. I think, more than anything else, this is just another big push away from physical media, and I think something that we can expect going forward. I think this is a bit more credence towards a lot of the rumors about Sony and Microsoft both working on handhelds to kind of compete with Steam Deck and Switch and stuff like that, which you would imagine those would also be all digital. So I think this is just kind of a bit more trending information in that direction.
And then we can move on to PC Gamer put out an article recently, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit in previous weeks about, smaller studios closing and not being able to find funding and that sort of thing. Well, PC Gamer put out an article talking about interviews in particular with a couple different developers who are explaining that deals that used to be really big and lucrative for smaller games, like getting your game on Epic, Epic Store has been, pushing to get games to be exclusive on Epic, or getting your game on Microsoft Game Pass, how those deals are no longer as good. And they're kind of dried up is in the title of the article. So we've kind of been hearing this, overall, that not just in games, but everywhere, right? Like funding is down and that sort of thing, but especially in video games, it's been harder for people to find publishers or to get, funding for their games. So it's obviously a bummer. I don't know, this could bounce back at some point, or this could just be sort of a sea change. Maybe Game Pass isn't going to be something that pays out a lot as the Microsoft has its own larger and larger suite of games, and maybe Epic is established enough or just not finding it lucrative enough to push for these things. So I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah, I don't really know what to add to this other than it makes sense. The AAA industry is going through a bit of a crash, or the bubble is bursting right now. And so, that's something that you kind of forget about it. You take for granted that like so many indies just get a big bag up front, not getting traditional sales, but being Epic's free game of the day, or getting a year contract on Game Pass day and date with release. So often that is just like a way to secure funding right from the very beginning for whatever your next project's going to be, or paying a lot of people's paychecks. So it sucks that that's kind of also affected by the AAA industry crashing right at the moment. I don't know exactly what else to add to that, other than it's some collateral damage that I didn't really think about until I read the article, and I was like, oh, of course, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. Well, a couple more here to close us out. We got some Silksong news to discuss, y'all. The sequel to Hollow Knight, Silksong, long-awaited game. A lot, Team Cherry, the creators of Hollow Knight, been working on this game for years now, and they've been pretty tight-lipped, if not outright silent, about the state of the game, when it's going to come out, all that sort of thing. Not that they owe anybody anything, but
come on, be entitled.
I don't want to be entitled with this one because there's enough people out there who are.
Sure.
But we do have a bit of a news that just today, April 1st, ironically, right? The game has appeared on the Xbox store page, and the Nintendo eShop they have their own dedicated. They already had a Steam page, and they've had that for a while, but that happened. And also of note, on the Xbox store page, it has an ESRB rating. So it is E10 plus over on Xbox. It's still rating pending on the Switch, which I don't know how honestly ESRB stuff works, if you get different ratings for different consoles and stuff. So I don't know which of those is, or if they're both true or what have you. But if it is ESRB rated, then that definitely is a sign of it being further along.
You can't rightly judge a game on its content if it's not content complete. So yeah. So maybe more soon. What do y'all think? Do you think there's any chance of this meaning anything, or is this just nothing? Shadow drop and a Nintendo Direct that's happening next week. That's
a bold statement.
By the time you're listening to this, you're actually playing. You're playing Silksong on your Switch.
That rating pending is about to quickly switch.
But when is Silksong 2 coming out?
Man?
What the hell, Team Cherry?
Oh man, what a long ride this has been. Even if it did come out on Wednesday or whatever, man.
Let this be a lesson to everybody. Just take a long ass fucking time to make your games. Just don't ever give anybody any information. Just do what you need to do. Work 3-day work weeks. It doesn't matter, man. Who cares?
Oh man, who knows?
By the time you're listening to this, you're playing Deltarune chapters 3 through 5 on your Nintendo Switch.
Well, we'll move on to our last bit of news then, and that is that there is another game added to the NSO service. This is actually an expansion pack one, so you have to pay the extra money because this is a GBA game. F-Zero Maximum Velocity has been added to the GBA app on Nintendo Switch Online. I'm pretty excited to try this out. I've never played this one. So any thoughts or tips on that, on F-Zero Maximum Velocity for me or anybody else who's...
This is a fun game. It's pretty early in the GBA's life cycle. This is not my favorite F-Zero game by a long shot. Okay. This might be one of my lower rung F-Zero games, to be honest, but it is fun. It's if you like I think you would like this, Patrick, because you're a fan of the original F-Zero.
The SNES,
It's like the Mode 7 style graphics, and it has the same kind of boosting as well from that. So it's you get a boost per lap, like you did in the original game. Mm-hmm. So that's not my necessarily favorite style of F-Zero, but it is a very fun game. And I mean, shit, dog. We've got we just got an update for F-Zero 99 as well. What
is that, David? Yeah.
I mean, it got a lot of significant updates. Let me pull up exactly what it was, but I know they added auto steering or like steering control, kind of like in Mario Kart, to make it a little bit easier for some people. There's a mirror mode added, new challenges that you can do every day, kind of, like a lot of mobile games do stuff like that just to bring you coming back to the game. So, so it's Nintendo is putting a lot more effort into this franchise than they've put into it in the past, decade or two. So, really hoping that, everything is coming up F-Zero. I'm really hoping for a new game or a GX remaster. So.
Yeah, I think of note that they put this out by itself, right? Like it wasn't like a drop with several other titles or several GBA games or whatever. Like I was kind of surprised to see the focus on F-Zero. That's like you said, it's kind of having a moment here. So let's hope that means something.
Oh yeah. Big, bold, and beautiful. F-Zero fans.
All right. Well, that does it for the video game news for the week. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking with Robbie all about concept art. We are back, and this week we are talking with Robbie Trevino about concept art. So before we get into it, Robbie, can you introduce yourself and maybe talk about your background as an artist, as a concept artist, et cetera, and what kind of things you've done?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, first of all, everyone. Howdy. So let's see. I'll give I'll try to give like the elevator pitch, because this could be like a 45-minute bit, and we don't want that. So concept artist, illustrator. I've been in the game for like almost 13 years now. Like kind of started like early 2012. So let's see, I started in tabletop RPG stuff. So like mainly like my very first client ever was Wizards of the Coast, and that was D&D and Magic the Gathering. And that brand, Magic specifically, has expanded like 100-fold since I first started in 2012. It's crazy the amount of stuff that Wizards pumps out with Magic. But anyway, I started in tabletop RPG, focusing on illustration, and then moved into AAA games after a couple of years of that, specifically Xbox, and then spent a lot of time out in the Pacific Northwest, which is where Xbox is, Seattle, that whole area. And then, I've since then, I spent a brief stint. It was like a 4-year stint of casino games, which not a lot of people like. There's all kinds of jobs that I've done, man. I have
a friend who's an artist who works in that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And it's interesting too. Right. And like how I got out of that completely, was, the pandemic really shut down like land-based casino game activity. And, one of the biggest clients that the company I worked for had was, in China, and that was like the pandemic, right? It was like a big thing, and so like I spent some time in mobile games too as well, before going like it's weird. The path isn't linear. It's not like the people that are like I've worked at the same company. I've been at Bungie for 20 years. It's like, no, I've been at like everywhere, just kind of like doing all kinds of odd jobs. A lot of it illustrative, a lot of it like conceptual. This is a fun fact. I worked in mobile games in 2015. I worked on, it was a company called Glue Mobile. And if you don't know that company, they made all of those, like the Kim Kardashian, the Taylor Swift, like those celebrity games. And I worked on the Nicki Minaj games called Nicki Minaj The Empire. And I worked on it for a year. I was isn't that hilarious?
That's hilarious. I love that.
And it's so funny because I haven't spoken to like coworkers from that studio since I left in 2016 until recently, when a Naughty Dog game dev got into like a Twitter spat with Nicki Minaj over like her use of AI art, and then all these old coworkers started coming out and they're like, let me tell you what it was like working with Nicki. And I was like, I was there too. Like, yeah. And by the way, working with Nicki Minaj is exactly what you're assuming it sounds like. It's, you're working with a celebrity, but like this celebrity is Nicki. So it was interesting, Yeah. And then, so it's like, I'd say, tabletop RPGs, AAA games, back into mobile, some casino game stuff, back into AAA games. Like I haven't really had like a static position somewhere, I feel like, for more than like 2 years tops. And, I've done some TV and film stuff too, like starting in like 2019, started doing a lot of work for Netflix and a lot of unannounced things. They make so much stuff. And I would say, let me rephrase that. They work on a lot of stuff and a lot of it doesn't get made. And the stuff that does get made, you've seen it, or maybe not. The catalog is massive at this point, but one thing,
they make a lot of stuff that is out there for like a day, and everybody talks about it, and then nobody ever talks about it again.
Yeah, because it's all. It feels like flyby content for real. But one thing I did work on that was like pretty notable is Love, Death, and Robots, and that's a pretty successful show. I think mostly due. It's not due so much to the writing. It's more so due to the fact that I think the creative mediums really push the conversation of animation as much as far more than like, the sort of like formulaic stuff that you'd see from insert X, Y, and Z studio that, plays it safe and does the thing that sells. So it's cool to contribute to that universe. I've worked on a few seasons of that. And then worked at Lucasfilm, again, animation for a little bit on The Bad Batch, which is, that's a spin-off show of Clone Wars. So no live action stuff for me, but I did get to contribute a small part to the giant sandbox that is Star Wars, and that's pretty cool. And more recently, it's just been a lot of freelance. Like I'm over at a startup right now called Jarv Sparks, which is like a NetEase. One of NetEase's like many studios working on something, and I can't talk about any of that right now, but it's definitely one of the coolest things that I've worked on in a very long time, and I'm hoping the thing gets made. Like with anything in games, right? It's so and a lot of the work that I've done, whether it was the illustrative stuff for Wizards, or stuff that shows up on a TV screen that you're either like interacting with or that you're watching. It's usually creature and character based. I don't really do a lot of environmental design stuff. It's more so like, the biological carbon based or not carbon based things that you'd see on screen that you're either riding, fighting, viewing, interacting with, and I think thanks to social media, I've done a lot of like random things, like a lot of like poster covers for like, bands that like I did in 2019, like I did two. Tool started going back on tour after like, I don't know what, like a 20-year hiatus. And, they, through social media, like Adam Jones, the guitarist, and sort of like art director, he just like, it was him, by the way. I was like, this is like a Nigerian scam or something, right? Like when does he ask me for money? And he's like, no. Like, I like your stuff. Like, and did a couple Tool posters. And,
that's cool.
It's, yeah, and again, nothing to do with concept art at all, but because of like being, active on social media and specifically, I guess, like Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, like, just be around and like someone will see you eventually. It's like that, I've been afforded like a few cool opportunities, Smashing Pumpkins too, in like 2022, just like a poster, but, I've kind of done, I feel like, between the like really weird stuff for like Nicki Minaj or like casino games where it's just like UI, stuff that goes into like a digital slot machine, or even like the physical cabinet, like doing like the packaging art for that, or stuff like, yes, this is a AAA game, and like I feel like I've kind of done like a little bit of everything at this point. So it's it's been interesting. It's like a smorgasbord of like, experience. It's not like one, I'm good at this one specific thing. It's like I've kind of done a little bit of everything, I feel like. So yeah. I
mean, there's a lot of things that I want to grab out of what you said there. I guess as a question I would want to ask after hearing you talk about this, and the fact that you jump around from job to job a lot. Do you like that? I mean, is that something that you prefer, or because I know some people that really, really enjoy freelance and love the variety of it. But then also sometimes get a little wary of the job insecurity. So is that something that is more just happened because this is the kind of work that you've been able to get, or is that something that you kind of prefer?
It's more so, it's just sort of the circumstances. It's not like a preference. I feel like given my like neurotic, overly paranoid nature. Also when you're like a creative person, you just like, you envision like someone says a word and you're like, I just imagined it's like Doctor Strange trying to beat Thanos. It's like, I've envisioned all 10 million outcomes. And it's like, why, like, chill, man. But it's like, that's me. Like, if I'm, so like, for me, it's like having like certainty and like predictability and like, like an expectation of like, yes, you will have a paycheck. Like I do prefer that. But also, I don't know, at this point, I've come around this circle of like the ebb and flow, the feast or famine cycle, which it's very cyclical. And I've been through it for like over a decade now, that it's like, I don't really, if something's bad or if things feel a little dry, eventually like it inevitably changes. It's felt so much worse this last like year and a half because of, both industries that I sort of jump between are suffering in different ways, like film strikes, versus like games and like downsizing. And it's just like, it feels bad. And so in that way, like, yeah, like I'd prefer to just have like, no, like you're fine. But it's not really a choice. It's just sort of like, it just kind of happens. And also when you happen to have a very like specialized sort of aesthetic or a very specific style, it's great to get paid to, like you're not a budget version of someone else. You're really not like but because you have such a specific thing and it's not necessarily the most marketable thing, like less people are going to hire you for that thing. So there's this trade-off of like, you get less work sort of like in general, but when you get it, it is incredibly rewarding and it can kind of still even out to be just as much work if you had ended up doing it consistently, like 6 months of work could still equal like a year's worth of work, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like if you consider not just a paycheck, but like the payoff of like quality of life and, the thing you're contributing to and what goes on the resume, payment means different things to me in different ways too. But yeah. Long-winded way of saying like, I think it'd be nice to have like steady employment or a predictable form of that. But like, no, I don't like being like, I'm going to like jump on like 50 different things this month. It's like, no,
right.
My brain can only take so much.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question that sort of takes us maybe back to ground zero of like, I think we have a pretty well-informed audience and, that knows a lot about games and development. But I am wondering if we could talk about what concept art is, especially in games. Like, because I do think that a more casual fan of any entertainment might not realize what a concept artist does or how that works. So if somebody was, came up to you and you said, I'm a concept artist, and then they were like, well, what's that? How would you explain it? And like, what role do you think it serves in creative media like games?
Yeah, in games specifically, maybe.
Yeah, so like this is really interesting you bring up this question because like I'm thinking back to, it wasn't this past Christmas, but it was the one before when I was visiting Australia, and it was it was at like my girlfriend's Australian. It was like a family event thing for her, and I tried to explain to you, I'll call them the common folk. Let's call them muggles, right? Like I was trying to explain, because one of them was like, what do you do? And I was like, I'm a concept artist, which I'm like, I might as well just say I'm like, well, I'm a graphic designer. That probably think it's the same thing. So I was like, I'm concept artist. What's that? And then I explained, I gave like literally like an awesome, like it was like TED Talk level, like elevator pitch. And they were like, oh, so like you and like the AI face apps, like it's the same thing, right? And I'm like, yeah, you nailed it, man. Like you got it. like no, not at all, dude. No, I mean, like how do you elevator pitch it? I mean, I don't want to like, come off too like ostentatious, like we are the digital alchemists and the weavers of dreams. But it's like,
that's pretty good.
That's kind of what it is. Like you're like, there's worlds that need to be built, and concept artists like are a incredibly vital part of that process. I saw AI was like in the discussion, and we can get to that like later, but like, that's going to probably come back to like this exact, these exact points. But like, what does a concept artist do? Someone, who gets hired to sort of dream up visually or visually interpret, the writings of, the pipeline of like the narrative team. It kind of depends, because like, you could say like a look dev artist or a viz dev artist on like, in an animation studio is making conceptual art, right? But it's not necessarily the same thing. it's like writing only takes you so far. Like you need a visual interpretation of that writing, of those written ideas. Or maybe there aren't any written ideas and it's a completely creative vacuum that, is open to anything. But it's like, someone needs to visualize like this world that is being built, whether it's that world is something that you interact with because it's a game, or you just simply view on screen because, it's a TV show or a film. And a concept artist, is in charge of designing, like visually interpreting and producing like what an entire world could look like. And that's all the little nuanced things of like, it could be something as small as blades of grass. It could be something as big as, the entire environment, the entire, world, whatever it is you're looking at. But yeah, concept artists, are like, they do what like a writer can't. And that's, draw the thing out, paint the thing out, visually produce that thing. It's another way of like tangibly understanding something, right? There's things that are written, or I guess you could say another way to explain it is it's a form of communication, right? There's written communication and there's visual communication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or
Like being a musician, but with a picture, that's one way of thinking of it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But also digital alchemist sounds pretty cool. So you could just go with that. I mean,
that leads me to another question that we had on here that I'm also kind of curious. And I know the answer to this is it varies, but I'm curious about how it varies for you. Like even people who maybe know a lot about, or understand what a concept artist is like, but like how detailed do you go as a concept artist, right? Because eventually that concept art is going to be handed off to somebody to make final art, right? Or hopefully, right? Or to take that creature you dreamed up and make it in the game or what have you. Is it very wildly with some of your different work doing concept art of like how many iterations, how many details, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, so to answer that question, it does vary. I wouldn't say wildly, but it varies. It can vary significantly. And by that, I mean, there are various stages of like a design process. Like we'll put it this way with games, right? There is like pre-production, right? Where you haven't gone into like you're full on producing the thing with tangible milestones. I would say there are tangible milestones, but like, in pre-production, you are basically, it's the blue sky moment of the project where you're sort of,
portion.
Yeah. Which for me is like where I come the most alive. Like, it's where, you basically just get paid to draw cool shit. Right. But like, what's a more, analogous way of explaining that? Well, it's like, there's a creative vacuum, you're establishing like the art Bible, you're establishing the rules. You're the person that's literally, like when you know how like you have a question at your work and you gotta like, oh, let me ask my manager. It's like, no, you are the manager. There's like no one else. Like you have to do it. They're like, you figure it out. Like you're figuring it out. And in that case, things could be done extremely fast. It could be done extremely loosely, because there's so many wrong answers that you might have to get through before the right answers come. And that's one of the realities of concept art is like, it's a lot like you're this promiscuous person who just keeps making kids, and like, but like, you don't like stick around, like you kind of have to say goodbye to your family, like, like the ultimate version of like a deadbeat dad, right? Like sort of like that, right? Where it's like, you don't get too attached, right? Cause you got to make, I don't know, 100,000 more of these things. So it's like, you don't be too attached to your ideas. I guess the saying is like, kill your darlings, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
right.
It could be a lot of work done very quickly, very loosely, because you're just trying to communicate an idea. And it's not really about perfection or refinement. It's about like convincing someone of that idea. And that's like usually what blue sky is. It's a lot of times you're working on like a pitch deck and you're trying to make something that's cool enough to sell as an idea, as, this is kind of roughly what the experience of the game could look like. You're trying to sell this to, I don't know, a group of people that will give that project further funding. And in that case, it doesn't need to be incredibly refined. It just needs to work and communicate an idea. When you go into production, which is further down the pipeline, that's where it's, again, concept artists are used, but things are more ironclad. The vision is sort of solidified. You can't really, deviate creatively. It's more so about like, someone needs to make this thing. And in your case, right, like for me, it'd be along the lines of like, this creature needs to be sculpted by someone on our character team. you need to give them like a design sheet that shows multiple views of this, so they can just, create the thing exactly like as you've depicted it, and in that way, that is a very refined, form of communication. Like that is a very polished, we'll call it an asset, right? Like I would, shoot that polished thing down, and then that would be, extrapolated and interpreted and, probably copied like to a crazy degree of detail, especially if it was like a AAA game that had like crazy poly count or something and a huge budget, more details, all that. But like, yeah, I would say it's more loose in pre-production and more refined in like far more refined, like ultimate refined, like in production.
Yeah, when I think of concept art, my mind goes to, and you said that you worked at Lucasfilm, but it goes to like the episode 1 making of documentary when you've got like Doug Chang, giving like a whole whiteboard full of all these different designs for different characters, and George Lucas going through and like Xing out the ones he doesn't like, you know what I mean? And so it's like, when I see that, I like feel for the concept artists that are like, oh man, I really love this design. And he just like literally used a red marker to put a huge X through it. Like, is that like painful? Cause it's also, this is work for hire. It's not like you can necessarily like use that design for something else. Like what does that feel like when you're working with somebody and trying to find the tone, and like maybe you're not exactly where you need to be on something like that?
Well, okay, so I won't speak for all concept artists, but I will speak for this concept artist. Mm-hmm. I remember in the beginning when I was much younger, right? 'Cause I've been doing this for like 12, 13 years. Like I remember it kind of felt almost like art school, like where you're like the student that, again, not all students, but I guess the student, like where it's like, it does maybe feel a little personal. Like in the very beginning, we're talking like maybe the first few gigs, right, ever, where it's like, oh man, like, not even like a good job, like the compliment sandwich, right? Like, come in with something, give your critique, like, it's all about kind of like saying the thing that needs to be said in the moment, not just like what should be said. But so I basically, I don't know, at a certain point, yeah, it is work for hire. And I kind of divorced myself from the feelings of it, a long time ago. I would say within the first year of freelancing, like realizing like the reality of like when you work with a client, right? It's not like you have to let go of this idea of like, I'm an artist and I'm making art. It's like, well, you're providing a service for a client, right, and you need to, deliver on deliverables. There are assets, there are things that are agreed upon, and like at a certain point you need to call something done. And if it needs, to be X'd entirely, that's fine too. It's not a painful process anymore. I think, right, maybe in the very beginning it was kind of like, but usually the only time it's ever maybe kind of like, oh, this is like, what a loss, what a true loss is when this is a piece of advice for like everyone. Like you always pitch ideas that you actually want, that you really care about. Because the thing is, chances are, if you've got a couple stinkers in that lineup and you're just trying to like, optically prove your worth with it, look at all the work I've done, the thing you don't care about is the one idea that they will go with. And then the thing you actually care about will get thrown away.
And you're tied to the thing you didn't give a shit about for the rest of your career. Yeah.
It's just like when someone pads their portfolio with work they don't actually want to get hired with, but they think they should have it there, and then they get hired to do the thing. Right. I really like character concepts, but I just thought it'd be a good idea to have environments in here, and now I can only get hired for environments. And it's like, no, only present the thing you care about. And when that doesn't get chosen, that sucks and feels painful. And sure. But sometimes, depending on the workplace, you could, if you really like sell it, sometimes you can sell it. Like you could actually convince the client, hey, here's why this is a good idea. And I know maybe you weren't feeling it the first time, but let me try to communicate it to you a little differently. And then sometimes that works.
I was wondering about that. Yeah. Are there ever times you go to, because this is work for hire, you don't own it, whatever. But are there times you go to bat for some idea that they're not as keen on? And is that dependent on the relationship or other factors?
It is dependent on the relationship. I've definitely gone to bat for ideas and it hasn't worked, but there are the clients that really like I've had some clients that like it's incredibly collaborative. Like I would say like the Netflix, like the Love, Death and Robots people were like incredibly collaborative, where they would just like they really, you weren't a wrist or an extension of someone else. Like, just draw the thing that I want. It was more like, no, like, we really want your ideas. And
yeah,
like,
that's what we brought you on in the first place.
Yeah. And there should be like a degree of trust there too, right? But sometimes there isn't. Sometimes literally they just go, I couldn't draw this thing that I want, and I'm so married to, but like, I need you to draw it. And like, those are not great jobs. Those are jobs where you're not really contributing. You're just sort of an extension of them. You're a wrist. But when you don't have those jobs is when, yes, it is this collaborative effort, and you could, the clients are actually listening, and they will work with you on the thing. It's very circumstantial. It just kind of depends. It's situational.
There's a question I wanted to ask you, and did you find yourself in concept art? And this I asked this question because I'm kind of curious, are there types of people or artists that are better suited to doing concept art than other artists? Like, there's some people who are like, you're too technical to be a concept artist, or you're too married to your ideas, or your art style, or this or that. Like, did you have to adapt yourself, or do you think or is that just no, anybody could be a concept artist?
Well, I mean, I don't think just anyone could be a concept artist, but because the thing is, like, I guess that is a really interesting question. There's like a few things to unpack, but I think like, I've worked with people who, they were almost like, it's like they're an illustrator trying to be a concept artist. It's like incredible draftsmanship, like amazing brushwork, like they can paint, they can draw, but it's like if you ask them, okay, now in a vacuum, create the thing, like, give me your idea. There are no ideas. It's more like, oh, I need to follow. No, like you tell me the idea, like, which is hilarious to get hired to do something and then be like, well, what do you think? And it's like, I don't know. That's why I hired you. Like, what do you mean? But I think like a really good example of this is like, I've been on both sides of, I'll explain it, like the development of like a Magic the Gathering, like every Magic the Gathering expansion that has happened, right? A new card set comes out, a new setting, a new expansion of another storyline in the many stories of Magic, right? Usually involving one or more planeswalkers, right? The sort of like main protagonistic characters. It's like, usually the way this works is like, the art gets commissioned, the card art itself gets commissioned, right? There's a style guide that gets emailed out to like a roster of artists. It's all outsourced. They're illustrators. They're not designing, not really designing the world. They might be asked, here's a style guide, design a cool thing based on like these ideas. So in that way, they're kind of designing. But, a lot of artists, who do stuff for Magic, and I started with cards. It's more like follow the style guide, like you extrapolate this information and sort of reinterpret it, and maybe like you pose it a little differently and you put this design into this situation and you depict it as an illustration. That's not what I would call conceptual design. Not like at the level we're talking about where it's like, I need a world build, and create assets that get modeled for game. That's different. That's design. But when I started getting hired to do the actual creative sprints, the world building sprints for those style guides that get emailed out to those illustrators, that's when I saw the complete opposite side of the coin, which is, you're just world building, you're just conceptually designing. And, I've worked with, illustrators on those before. And, I could tell some of them were having a little bit harder of a time because it was just a different creative hat to wear, right? They weren't pulling from anything other than like, written words. There wasn't like when you've only ever been hired to like sort of illustrate pre-existing information, and maybe, reinterpret it a little bit, like to also be asked to produce the information that doesn't even exist yet, right? AKA this world building style guide. It's a different creative muscle. And, I also think that it's interesting. Wizards will hire, illustrators to do like conceptual designs. But I mean, some of them really pull it off too. It's a mixed bag. It's not to say that anyone did a bad job. It's just, you can tell when someone is sort of out of their element, right? And they're, it's a little bit more work. And some people, I feel like everyone did amazing jobs on all of those pushes. It was very impressive work. But yeah, I could definitely tell, like some people are sort of more singularly minded or tend to like gravitate towards one camp and not both. It's one or the other. And I've kind of always been in the middle personally. So for me, it was like totally a natural fit to like, just like I got to work on the Kamigawa expansion, which is, it's like Neo Tokyo, future. It's like cyberpunk meets like feudal Japan sort of. And then it's like Phyrexia, which is awesome. It's like the most like metal. It's like H.R. Geiger meets like Big Shinsky meets like Aliens meets like Dante's Inferno meets like, just like, it was like metal. Like that's the only way I can describe it. Just like, but like metal chic, right? Like Hellraiser, for example, right? The Cenobites are alien and they're terrifying, but they also have an elegance to them. Like they're fleshy, but like they wear really cool leather. So it's just like,
they
like
keep it tucked in and tight.
Yeah. So like, like weird goth bar stuff, So it's like, how do you make something like, terrifying and elegant at the same time? And it's like, that was Phyrexia. But yeah, it's just, I'm just using that as a good example because I feel like I've worked with a lot of, when it comes to the magic stuff, I've worked like side by side with illustrators and I've worked with concept artists. And then I've worked with people that are sort of hybrids of the two. And I guess I would consider myself like a hybrid, and everyone's always done a great job. It's just, a different, like sort of like, fish out of water situation for some people. And it's interesting seeing them, work through that process to come to something.
More specifically with video games, than when you're doing something like, with tabletop and card games, a lot of times it's like that art is right there and it's very tangible and you can see where that's gone from. In games, so often it feels like you'd be designing something that then has to be practically enforced or created within, the realm of whatever game engine they're using, especially, look at games like back in the early days of 3D where you'd have these crazy, really intricate concept art designs, and then you see it in game and you're throttled by the amount of actual polygons you can use to show these creatures and biological monsters and stuff, like the kind of stuff that you create. So I guess I'm just curious as to like how that is different from, say, something like tabletop or working in film or TV.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has to do with functionality, right? Like almost, that's probably the biggest differentiation. It's like, something on a card just needs to work at a certain scale, right? It needs to be, small and very tiny, but still, visually read from a distance. With games, you're interacting with it, whatever the thing is, from multiple angles, a creature or boss or something that you're fighting, or maybe it's a prop that you're interacting with, or it's an environment that you're traversing. It's like, there's an interactive element and like a necessary functionality to it. And in that way, that's where there can be a lot of, I'm thinking of like production now, where it's like, maybe it's not even production, because I feel like, I know I mentioned like two different phases, but I feel like there's a lot of overlap. And sometimes you put on those two different hats in the same workday. But like,
sure,
let's say you've got a crazy idea. You pitch it as like a flat 2D static image. It gets modeled, and then suddenly, it doesn't look so good in game, or it looks good from this angle, but not this angle. How do we make it function better? Like to enrich, the end product, which is like an experience for a player, right? How do you make this an actually effective thing in the game? And that's where, like a 3D, model will get like bounced back to maybe like a 2D only concept artist, and they go, okay, here's the rear view of this thing, and this is the exact geometry taken from the game, but like, how can you push this design like back in 2D, like this basic primitive geometry that, got mocked up in 3D, put in the game engine, didn't look great. We turned it around to a bunch of views that you hadn't worked on in 2D. Can you then like refine it a bit further? Maybe like push some of these shapes, some of these proportions, basically I'm asking you to take a 2D pass, from a different angle. And, we're going to use the literal geometry that got thrown into the game engine, and then you massage it a bit and you send it back, and, maybe it's working, maybe it isn't. Here's some more notes. And it is, a lot of times it's this like collaborative ping pong of like, we're going to work together, to make this thing like work as a whole, like, like for the final outcome. But it's interesting because you look at like, I look at like, job requirements on job listings. And, a lot of times what I'm seeing with game studios are, we would prefer, instead of hiring a 3D artist and then, a 2D concept artist. We're just looking for a concept art. This is the concept art job listing, right? Do you know Unreal and Unity and like 50 other things that like really aren't like a concept artist's, we'll say, traditional job or skill set, because it would be easier if we could just have you do everything that I just described, right? But instead of paying 2 people to do it, we'll pay 1 person to do it. And that's, and like, I get why you would do that, and also it's just like, it just makes me go like, I have like another thing to learn. But like, at the same time, it's like, that is true. If you could eliminate like that feedback process between 2 different people and I could just do it all myself, I would be, an ideal, worker in that situation. And like myself, my workday would be shorter because I wouldn't need to like wait for emails from someone. I can just like do the thing. So that's all just to say that like, it's,
but how well are you at giving notes to yourself? That's the real question.
Yeah.
Pretty good, actually. Now, pretty good. Back in the day, not so much. No, you're the best. No, I never thought that. But yeah, hopefully that like, I know it might've been a little rambly, but hopefully that like answers the question. It's just a lot of back and forth, and it comes down to like functionality. Like again, like a static image on a card doesn't need to like, you don't interact with it other than like you look at it with your eyeballs. Like something in game, you're going to see it from many different angles. It's got to work everywhere.
Yeah.
I do think we have to ask you about your thoughts and opinions on AI and the evolving, situation with AI art. And because I think arguably, right, concept art is one area AI art could be used for, arguably more than some others. So what are your opinions on the technology and
and why are human concept artists like still very important in this current landscape?
Yeah, I mean, we're not needed anymore. It's Skynet. No, I'm just kidding.
April Fools.
Yeah, there we go.
Nervous laughter. Yeah, no, I mean, like, I think I mean, it's everywhere, right? It's the new, what was the like cyclical VC funding buzzword or term? Like I feel like 2020 it was like streamed and playable content, right? For like the pandemic lockdown, and now we're seeing like the overcorrection and the downsizing of sort of that interest, and like now the money, like what are people investing in now? And it's like AI as just like a blanket buzzword, which to a lot of people it's been marketed as like it's this sentient, aware thing that is like really, like it's Deus Ex Machina, and it's like not yet. I think we're not far off, but like, I mean, I just look at like we'll speak on generative AI art, right? Specifically, and this being like, the visual images that we see everywhere from like Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, all of this. I've been like very like present with all of this. It's certainly not like I've heard of that thing. It's like no. I see it everywhere. I read about it. Like I've looked into it. I've even dabbled in it a little bit. I mean, like a long time ago, back when Midjourney was a very like primitive, like almost like abstract, blobby. It was just like. It wasn't really anything, and like what I saw was like potential and like cool shapes and like interesting mood board reference that I could then further expand on, as an already creative person with, years of training, right? Like I saw like potential. It wasn't like I'm an artist now because I couldn't draw before. And now I can, spit things out of a machine, so it's like, in that way, I found it interesting, but it still never really like yielded anything like usable for me personally. And I just kind of dropped it. And now it's this, radioactive thing that is, there's all these concerns about, ethical data sourcing and like all that stuff is incredibly valid. And I agree. It's interesting. Like, yeah, I'm one of, I don't even know how many artists that are like in the database for, I think it's the Leon 5 database for Midjourney and whatever Stable Diffusion. I can't remember I feel like a bunch of these I think it's OpenAI, just like these different AI services sort of pull from this massive database, and I think it's the Leon 5 database. Which, I mean, I was on like a list of artists, and people were messaging me about it, and I was like, well, I feel like if you've had any kind of like remote relevance like online in the last like 50 to 100 years, you're probably in the database somehow. So it's like right. And to be clear, this isn't something to like aspire to. It's just like a reality. It's like I'm in this database. didn't ask to be in it. Like, I understand why people are upset. I feel like, you know, the reaction to it has been very understandable. And I don't want to give like the most like basic cliche, like, you know, like, yeah, it's here to stay in Pandora's box. Like, so I'll try to give like the perspective of like, to someone who isn't an artist, I'll try to give like the artist's perspective and like, you know, or the concept artist perspective. But I feel like there's a lot of overlap. Mm-hmm. You know, your livelihood, the craft that you've dedicated yourself to for, you know, for me, it's been, if you include my schooling, it's been almost 20 years. It's like, I understand why you would feel like this existential dread, right? Like I thought this would always be an option for me. It isn't now. Like, what else do I do? I come from Michigan, right? I come from like, I was working a hydroponics job, like before I got hired to do like art full time, you know, and then before that I was at a hardware store for like 7 years. You know, I can't imagine my life without art. So in that way, like I understand people's fear of it. And I can only offer like the perspective of someone who is in a position that I'm not saying, you know, like your resume will let you outrun AI. I just feel like you'll be less affected, or in a less immediate sense, you'll be affected, you know, less until it advances further and further and further. But I don't know. I wouldn't say like concept art is just going to disappear. I wouldn't say, you know, like if anything, it would probably just change. You know, I've heard stories of people who, you know, their titles get changed from concept artist to art director because they're now, you know, working with AI and they're art directing the AI. But it's, you know, technically they're doing like concept art and then they're, you know, painting over, or, you know, like they're working with AI, and like it's almost like AI is like a step in their creative process. And, you know, like, but technically, like, I would still say, like, they're being a concept artist. You know, it's obviously up for debate, like, whether, like, what they're doing is ethical or not. But I'm just saying, like, you know, it's changed. But they're not like, oh, you're fired now because Midjourney will do it for me. It's like, well, Midjourney still needs, at the moment, like, a human element. So, you know, and the other thing is, I don't know, from what I've seen, when I began talking about answering this question, is like, AI, you know, it has been painted as this sentient thing. And like, again, maybe that stuff's out there because AI is everywhere. But like, if we're talking about like the generative image stuff, like Midjourney, like Stable Diffusion, at face value from a distance, it's impressive. You know, it looks really cool. And it was created very quickly. A lot of times, you know, but then like you begin to really look at it quickly and you realize like there's really there's 100 fingers. That's a good one. But also just like, you know, there's not really anything of substance. Like nothing's being said. It's just sort of mathematically mashing around pixels that it's sampled from a database. Like there isn't like the element of humanity, right? The thought and the decision just isn't there. It just isn't. Like people will say it, but they don't know what they're talking about because I've looked at art for so long, you guys, and I've done this for so long and I've made so much art. I can tell you there's no like machine learning is not the same thing as human learning, right? There isn't that like, you know, like people like to make the argument like, well, like, you know, a human referenced things and then learned like, and just as the database did. And it's like, well, but it's not exactly the same. It's not even close.
And you talked a lot earlier about how collaborative this process is, and especially for a concept artist, it's like you're going to be working with people that are then going to be giving you feedback, trying to shape what it is that they want, using you as a tool and as a source for inspiration. A lot of the people that I see online, it's like, oh, well, these jobs are going to be gone, and I'll watch a whole movie of Wes Anderson's Lord of the Rings or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, but I mean, like, what? There's no there. It's like it's like you have to kind of like people really take for granted like how important communication, collaboration, and like the human element of relationships is in the creative process. And I think that's something that you know, I don't know that we'll ever replicate that through machine learning, right?
I think I mean I agree, and actually you bring up a really good point. I think one thing again that people also take for granted, myself included, is that basically any facet of the modern world that you live and exist in today was thoughtfully designed by a human. You know, I'm talking like the desk you're leaning on right now. I'm talking about the clothes you're wearing. I'm talking about the very form of communication we're having right now, you know, digitally. It's like these AI might have had a small component in it for like coding or something, sure, but it's like really the human element is there. It's like humans make everything, and like, yeah, it's a little discouraging to hear people go like, oh yeah, like these baby artists, like it's fine, we don't need them. And it's like, well, you've needed them up to this point, and everything that you hold dear, all of your favorite characters that you've played or cosplayed as or like played in games, and like those worlds, like they were all made by artists, like people that thoughtfully designed them and worked with other people. Is a mini army. I know no one probably reads. I know no one reads the fucking Marvel credits. You might stay after for that like second sneak peek, or whatever. But like, yeah, that whole army of people, like that's how many people were needed to make the thing come to fruition that you enjoy, that you take for granted so easily. And I get it. Like some of this stuff, not everything in the modern world is perfect, but it's like, yeah, like people were needed to make the thing. And the other thing is the AI stuff, none of it would exist without like the human database that it was built on top of. And I don't know, like until sentience is achieved and like AI truly becomes a self-aware thing, like, and I think if that happens, like it will look different and it will truly be something we haven't seen before, but it just hasn't happened yet. Like at least not with like Midjourney, that is, it's all just a regurgitation of what's been done before. And a lot of times it's a thoughtless, like soulless, mess of a reinterpretation. And in that way, like, yeah, I don't think like human artists are going to be replaced, human concept artists, like in the most immediate sense. Like I could see entry level positions, right? The things that you could sort of simply automate away, right? Those jobs, I could see those being harder to come by. If I was like, I'm going for my first junior role ever, and usually, the asset team, maybe it's not even concept art. Maybe it's like the team that's on like textures and scatter and, things like terrain for, the environment team, right? Maybe like there were like very junior texture artist positions needed. And like simply through AI now, it's like those positions have been automated away. Sure, I could see that. But like for the higher level things, the things that like require, like we need to be in like 10 meetings a day. We need to have a whiteboard. We need to be like creatively collaborating on this. Like there just isn't an AI. Like Midjourney is not going to be able to sit in a room with you and, have those conversations like human will. So, that's all just to say, I mean, there's so much more that we could talk about this, but it's all just to say that it's like, I mean, it is affecting artists in real time. And that sucks, But to say that it's all just going to go away, or at least go away like now in the immediate sense, like I think it'll change, and I think humans will still be needed in some way. It's too hard to tell with like I can't give like a definitive answer in this because it's all happening so quickly and it's happening at like a rate that no one is prepared for. But right now we're definitely needed, and I'm going to try to stick around for as long as I possibly can, and.
Yeah.
At least in a professional sense. You can keep doing art, unprofessionally if you're not needed anymore. But like professionally, trying to hold on for as long as I can, I don't think it's going to be over like that soon.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think some of it is very buzzy, right? And I think that some of these things too shall pass. But I, as someone who works in animation and works with a bunch of artists like every day, like, I understand the existential dread of it.
Oh,
right?
yeah. You probably see it like firsthand, right?
Yeah, all the time, right? But I mean, but either way, I think that was really well said. And maybe we could just close out real quick on just a couple of your favorite artists that or concept artists that you just find inspiring or have maybe inspired a lot of your work.
Man, there's like a whole shelf and then so like I always think books are a good idea until I like, have to move, and then I'm like, fuck.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think probably the single most influential concept artist. I think all of them are deceased now at this point, but Sid Mead, if you know who he is, he was legendary, a true visual futurist. I talked about this a bunch of times with people. Like I mentioned him, I mentioned Geiger, Beksinski, Moebius, that's like my aesthetic is very, very Moebius. I mean, honestly, I got hired for like all that Love, Death and Robots stuff initially in the beginning The episode is called The Very Pulse of the Machine. If you ever want to check it out, it's season 3. I can't remember the episode, but it's literally a love letter to Moebius, and it's a very otherworldly, very like ethereal sort of episode. But they wanted like a Moebius-esque artist, and they were like, you fit the bill. So, I mean, I'm not the only one, obviously, that he's inspired, but big influence. But Sid Mead specifically, it's interesting. I went to art school originally. I went to a like automotive design school because I grew up in Detroit. I grew up in the Motor City, and I still to this day love cars. I mean, I drive a Corvette, I love cars. I wanted to be a car designer. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And then when I found out like year 1, I was going to be drawing door handles for the rest of my life, I was like, I'm good. And also all of my professors were like, you can't make any of this stuff. All your ideas are not buildable in reality. And I was like, I think I need to do something else. And, I didn't switch to concept art as like a department because it didn't exist at my school, but I found an illustration department, and the teachers there showed me Sid Mead's books, and it was all the stuff he designed for like Johnny Five Short Circuit and like Star Trek and Blade Runner. Runner. He designed like he literally invented like the cyberpunk aesthetic, like at least for Blade Runner, that sort of like dystopian, sort of look, right? And I just saw his work and I was like, you can get paid to like this, I guess I never considered like how the movies I love got made, right? Like the Ralph McQuarries, who made all the Star Wars stuff, it's like, I've always just watched movies and liked them or didn't like them. It's like, but have you ever wondered like who made them and how they made them? And did you know that maybe you could like also do that if you wanted to? And like, that's, but I think Sid Mead was like the biggest, like just seeing all of his work, I was like, damn. And even now I look back and I think like, if me existed then in that same vacuum that they existed in, could I even fathom a fraction of like what they invented? And the answer is probably not. That's why like they truly are visionaries, because they didn't have like a Google database to search or a Pinterest board to reference. They were literally just kind of just imagining a different, reality. And that's such a high level of thinking. And it's really hard to find people at that level, like the Geigers, the Ron Cobbs, the Bikshinskis, the Sid Meads. Like they are truly legendary, and their work stands the test of time for that very reason, because they truly found like something different in their own lane, and they sort of moved into it. And nothing is better than pulling up the classics and looking at them, because I feel like, especially with AI, like really cluttering the like reference feeds, like Pinterest boards and stuff, it's like, it's really hard to find, that sort of raw, visceral, well of like creative ideas, like the closest thing to originality that you could think. And like going back and cracking open like an old classic, one of the classic books, is just like, and also being able to feel it like tangibly. It's like, this is the good stuff, Like
I just moved a bunch of art books over to my office today, actually. So I was flipping through some of them. It felt really nice.
Oh yeah, seeing something like printed like physically on paper versus like, on a screen where light is passing through it. It all feels, I think it stimulates different neurology, and it's just different. It's just different, and it looks good, and it's just as inspiring. But yeah, that's like a really long-winded way of saying just like those artists are monumental, and I don't think concept art as a term would even exist without like the help of those giants. And definitely encourage everyone listening to like check out all of those guys, because they are fantastic.
Very nice. I think that's going to do it then for our main topic here on concept art. Thank you so much, Robbie. We're going to take another short break. And when we come back, we're talking about the games we've been playing recently. So I've been mostly playing the same games I play and talk about all the time. So I'm going to not talk about those, but I am going to talk about 2 games. My kids started watching some YouTube videos of people playing Kerbal Space Program, which is a game I had heard of, but it's not really up my alley at all. But he started to ask if we could buy it. And I was like, I'm not going to buy that game, but you can. And he has enough money to buy it. So he bought it on Steam. I was also really nervous because he's mostly played games with controllers. And, this is the kind of game you really got to play with mouse and keyboard. I mean, you don't have to, but you know,
You should.
You should. And it's just not my kind of game, so I can't really help you with, you know what I mean? But he's put a bunch of hours into it, and calling me in, watch me launch this rocket. And so I've messed around with it a little bit with him. So we've been playing a lot of Kerbal Space Program over here, which is basically a space simulator, like where you build and launch rockets and things like that.
Has he gotten into orbit yet?
Yeah, he has. I don't think he's made any of his own things get into orbit. It comes with some pre-designed things, and he's been able to get, just today actually, he got one of those into orbit.
That's a tough game.
Yeah, I was real nervous about it, and I kept like sort of delaying the actual purchase to make sure he was really interested.
Ooh.
Not like that long, but he's already put enough hours into it to justify it, and he seems to love it. So, and then he also picked up his 3DS recently and started playing Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D, which we have physically for the 3DS. And as soon as he did that, I was like, oh, do you need any help? Because that I can help you with. And so we were passing that back and forth and playing some of that. And I really, I've never played through that one in its entirety. And I don't think I will on the 3DS because I don't want to mess with his save file and stuff, but I think I'm gonna play that emulated on the Steam Deck.
I'd say a good way to do it is the Wii version emulated on a Steam Deck, because you can play it back in full HD and everything like that. You could set the waggle thing like to a button press, so you don't have to shake fucking system. Yeah. But no, what a great game, man.
Yeah, so I think I got the bug for that one. So yeah, that's it for me.
I have been playing a little bit more of Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown. Haven't gotten too far in the game yet, but I am past like the tutorial area, which is where I was last time. And man, the game is like super fucking fun. It really does scratch that Metroid itch. Yeah, I'm looking forward to playing more of that. I've been really enjoying it quite a bit. I am a little bummed. I think my OLED has either a busted speaker or it has a like maybe some debris on the diaphragm of the speaker or something like that inside the device. So I need to get some screwdrivers and open that thing up and see if because I've had that happen before with laptops where I think like just some, kitty litter or some little bit of something like floats around my house and somehow gets in the vents, and then like and it's like you think the speaker's busted, but it's really just kind of like rattling as it hits like the lower notes. So I need to do that. I just asked somebody here in town who repairs stuff how much it would be, and he's like, that'll be $150. I was like, fuck that, I'm gonna get a screwdriver and do it myself. But anyway, that's a little aside. I've been playing my Wii U a little bit as we're heading towards the death of the Wii U. I've been playing Mario Maker specifically, and I've been streaming Mario Maker. I've been playing a lot of the 100 Mario Challenge runs, which are super fun, and that's something that's not in Mario Maker 2, and so I'm gonna really miss that when it's gone. Obviously Pretendo has all these levels like backed up, and like you can make a Pretendo account and you can play them, but with my account, this is kind of my last hurrah going into this, and I've been winning some expert runs, which has been a lot of fun. You got to do 16 in a row and get to the very end and save the princess, and that's super fun. It's all endless in Mario Maker 2, which is still fun, but not as fun as actually having an end goal in sight. And then, so I'm enjoying that. So follow me on Twitch and watch me in the waning hours of the system. And then lastly, while we were talking, some news dropped that Princess Peach Showtime event is happening for Tetris 99. And I didn't realize that. But I actually just picked up Tetris 99 the other day randomly. It's been a long time since I played it. And the first game I played, I fucking won, baby.
Whoa,
first
nice.
Place. Yeah, I was so excited. And then when I was looking just like for a video to throw in, that's when I was like, oh shit, this Princess Peach Showtime event is happening. So a little late breaking news here, but on April 8th, the day that the Wii U dies, the Tetris 99 Maximus Cup is happening. But yeah, that's basically what I've been playing lately. What about you, Summer?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go next. I have pretty much just been playing Persona 3 Reload. It's on Game Pass, so I was like, okay, it's time for me to go ahead and start playing that. And I get it now. I only watched other people play Persona 5, and it became like a favorite game experience for me, just watching other people play it. So now that I am figuring out the rhythms, the schedules, figuring out how to spend your time in the game, And just Persona 3 has its own themes and just musically and styles that just all fit together really, really well. Different from Persona 5, but still like you get how it's all from the same franchise. And if anything, it just makes me kind of excited to like maybe play 4 next. I'm totally into this franchise now. I get it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. What about you, Robbie? You been playing anything recently?
Yeah, so I've been watching a lot more people play. Like if I don't have the time to play, I'll just sort of like vicariously play through like other people, right? Usually like on Twitch or something. But I'm in the Discord and everyone is playing Helldivers 2, and it's the Starship Troopers game, and it's like it's awesome. It takes me right back to Starship Troopers. What I do have time to play though, this might sound funny, I don't know, but I'm not. For being as involved as I am in like the actual creation of games, I don't game a ton, but when I do, it's usually just like the tried and true classics that I love. And it's just something like, I know people who play Overwatch because it's like, it's just simple, like low commitment. Like, I just get in, I get out. For me, I've been jumping around a lot with the Dead Space remake, which isn't even really that new, but it's like a visual overhaul on like the original Dead Space, and like the mechanics are a little dated nowadays. But I don't know, maybe it's a nostalgia thing, but it takes me back to like when it was this fresh, cutting edge thing of like what, like zero gravity combat, like that's crazy, and like there's like health and UI elements like integrated into the character, like also really cool. Like, I don't know, there's a lot I really like about it, and it looks really good for a remaster, I guess you could say. I don't know if you guys have played it at all, but
yeah, I played a little bit of it. Yeah, it's great.
The new one, Dead Space. Yeah.
No, I thought they did a great job with it, and it's like I keep seeing the trailer for Alien Romulus, and it just makes me want to play more space horror games. And I'm just
Alien Romulus looks cool. I mean, I don't know how much different it could be, but it's kind of like, I feel like it's kind of hard to top. Like, Alien had the mystery going for it. Now that we've seen a 1,000 xenomorphs, it's kind of hard to be interesting. But if you could have a tasteful homage, maybe that would be cool. Like the trailer looked awesome. So it made me think of Alien Isolation, another classic.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for this episode on concept art. Thank you so much, Robbie, for coming and talking with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks to milkyway.co, who does our website. Thanks to Corduroy, who does our music. Thank you to all of our patrons over on Patreon. We really appreciate your support. If you're looking to find me, Patrick, you can find me most places on the internet as PDYX. And a real quick, want to shout out that I'm going to be streaming on Twitch, which is PDYX123, a lot this week, just showing off the demo and showing off all the little hidden things in it and that sort of stuff, and trying to speed run it and get the best speedrun time I can to put up on like speedrun.com and stuff. So stop by this week over there on Twitch.
Yeah, you'll find me in Patrick's chat on Twitch as We Bitched. You should just make me a mod, Patrick. I'm probably gonna be there most of the time, most of your streams now. We Bitched is where you can find me.
Yeah, I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And what about you, Robbie? Where can people find you online?
Yeah, so I guess just, Robbie Trevino art at Instagram. That is where I'm like primarily active. And then, I'm also on Twitter a bit too. And that should just be at Robbie S. Trevino at Twitter. Or I guess it's X now, x.com.
You've got an art station as well, right? It's got some of your portfolio work.
Yeah, that's where most of my portfolio lives. The stuff I can show publicly anyway. Yeah, RobbieTrevino.artstation.com, I believe.
Very good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Make sure you check out Robbie's art. He's got some incredible stuff. I love your sense of scale that you do with a lot of your work. As a big kaiju fan, I just recently slammed all the way through Neon Genesis Evangelion, and looking at some of your art was really reminding me a lot of some of the angels in that show, and so really enjoy a lot of your stuff.
I have 5 Ava statues around here, and then I've got a bunch of Gundams behind me. So I've always been a fan of scale. So,
yeah, very
thank
good.
you.
So if you like that kind of stuff, make sure you check out Robbie. And then if you like to find our show on social media, we are at Switch Headz on Twitter, at Super Switch Headz on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We got a website, switchheads.com. We've got our Patreon page, Discord, and a Facebook group. We'll have links to all three of those in the description of this episode. Whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify, Apple, any of those podcasting platforms, make sure you throw us a like, throw us a subscribe, and join us on Discord, man. What a great community. We love everybody there. That's going to do it for this episode. We're going to be back next week with another fucking banger. So make sure you don't change that dial. But in the meantime, gang, you know the drill. Be safe. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Maybe pick up a pen and paper and pencil and start learning how to draw if you haven't yet. God damn it. We still got a little bit of art left in us as a society. That's going to do it, gang. We love you guys very much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.